Well, I'd like to share with you who I am. I was in the residential school in Fort Alexander. I was brought there around 5. I believe I was 5 years old, and I had to wait until 6. So I had a month to wait before they actually allowed me to come in. So I went there because I felt this was a place that the older boys went, because my 2 older brothers also went to the boarding school. And so, but when I got there, I found myself alone again, because they were transferred over to a different section of the school, and we weren't really allowed to visit with one another. I couldn't run over to see them in line. But what I really want to speak about right now is one evening when I was, after spending 1 year there, I saw what was happening in there, and what was happening to children that were speaking their language, and the things that were happening to children that were doing things that the nuns, priests would not allow us to do. So it was a difficult time in my life as a child, because I was very confused. It's like there was a running from something that there was no getting away from. But that one evening, then there was an evening where I raised up my arm. And I raised up my arm because that evening, before we all went to bed, the nun spoke to us, and she told us we weren't allowed to play after the lights were turned out. So after telling us that, we all got into the bed, and she shut off the lights. She made her way to her room. So which was in the same dormitory, but it was closed off, to her own private room. And but short minutes later, after the lights went out, something fell off one of the beds, and it landed on the floor and started rolling. And a sudden, I guess, attack of fear, I guess, came over me, where it just felt paralyzing, because I didn't want the nun to hear it, and I didn't want anyone to get a strapping because of something like that. But she did hear it, and she came out of the room. She went to the light switch. She turned it on, and she asked us all, like, who is playing? After we were told no one was to play, and no one confessed to it. And so she asks us again, like, who's playing? You were told not to be playing after the lights were out. And again, no one responded to the question. So she asks the third time, and she asks, who is playing after you were told not to be playing after the lights were out? If no one is going to confess to this, then everyone is going to get a licking, a good strapping. And the thoughts that raced through my mind at the sound of what she said was these kids, the sounds of crying, the sight of seeing these kids getting hit, really caused my heart to feel, I don't know what it was at the time, but it was something that caused me to raise up my arm and confess as though it was me who did that, who was playing after the lights were out. So no one confessed it. But when she asked that third time, I raised up my arm thinking about these kids, crying as they were going to bed, and thinking about no one being there for them to protect them from this type of, hurt. And as a child, it was something that confused me because there didn't seem to be. There was always something that we did that was wrong, that always allowed them to hit us. And it didn't seem right to me. That's why I guess that's probably why I felt like there's no one here to protect them. And I guess that it just made me take that role of, as a parent maybe, to watch over them, because that's the way it was in my life. It was always watching over these children, making sure that they didn't fight, making sure that there was peace among them. And I myself was always getting into trouble with others that were wanting to hurt me because of always protecting these children. And I would get so tired. But but that night, when I raised my arm, she said, "Come." And so I went to see the nun. But as I was making my way to see the nun, I was saying, "I'm not going to cry. I'm not going to cry. I'm not going to cry." I was determined not to cry. And as I stood in front of her, she said, "Put out your hand." So I put out my hand. Then she began to hit me. I don't know how many times she hit me on one hand, but then she told me to put out my other hand and started to hit me on the other hand. But I was determined again not to cry. But suddenly I hear a voice say to me, and I didn't know it at the time, but this voice says, "Pretend to cry and she'll stop." But determined not to cry was kind of something I had to struggle against. But it was something that was overcome by that voice. I did pretend to cry, and she did stop. And as I was making my way back to my bed, I was telling these kids, as I was looking at them, "It's okay. It's all right. It's okay." And I remember that evening, but in my heart today, I know all these things, were the plans of the enemy to destroy us both, the nuns, the priests, us as First Nations people. But God has put a love in my heart for these nuns and for these priests, to forgive, because I know how much I myself have been forgiven. I don't see myself as anyone that was better than they were. And my wearing of the breastplate and the headdress, it's something that I've always wanted to learn, but was never allowed to learn in the residential school. And I found it a beautiful thing to learn about these things. And many times I came across struggles because people would tell me, "You're not supposed to wear that here." So I was learning about our culture and the things we have adopted from other cultures. But anyways, there's so much to be said about culture. And I want to say that in my heart, I've received Jesus Christ, and I love Jesus Christ. And this is something I know that we all need in our heart, is Jesus Christ. Because what He came to do for us on the cross, to suffer and die on the cross for our sins. And that's what it is that He's set me free from, were those sins. And I share this with you because of a love in my heart that He's given me for us all. So I wanted to share this with you, not to be ashamed of who you are, or not to stop wearing who you are, but be who you are through Jesus Christ, because He loves you, and I love you. God bless you.